Hello and welcome back, my friends. My name is Betsy, and this is part 3 for this drawing. It is just so incredible that I have spent so much time working on this drawing. Already it's been several hours, and I have shared the process with you, so if you're interested in seeing the rest of it, you can always check out my channel. Very recently I posted 2 other videos for this. They are quite lengthy, and it does show a lot of detail. But right now, this is the final part, part 3, where I am just continuing on with the drawing and the doodling. As you can see, I'm just using a single pen here. It's just a fine liner, a Statler 0.3 millimeter. And I just really had so much fun with this one. I know that I tended to work on this in the evenings. So once I was done with kind of my chores and other things that I needed to do around the house, and then I would just sit down and just spend time alone with the drawing in a nice quiet room. I have a tendency to watch things a lot, like maybe I'll watch some YouTube or I'll watch a movie. But I think for this one, I really needed to just spend time with it and just kind of think about some of the things that I wanted to do in the sense of my artwork and other things that I had planned. And this one was just a really good one, so I could kind of just really focus on those little details and just really think about a lot of things that I had on my mind recently. And so here I'm just working on some of the similar patterns that I had already been working on previously. I really tried not to add too many other textures. It's still the same kind of line work, the same sort of spirals, and occasionally here and there some smaller shapes, but it pretty much was all the same thing. You'll notice that it kind of runs through the entire drawing, the same idea, the same kind of textures. And I think that there's something to be said for that, because often when we draw, we try to make things really complicated, and I don't think that that's really necessary. I think that even in a drawing that looks like it's technically intricate, it really isn't. If you can just stick to maybe about 3 designs or 3 patterns, or just however it is you like to consider them, 3 design ideas, and just incorporate those and really focus on them, you can really get something that looks intricate and is technically intricate, but it's really just composed of a couple of simple ideas. And that's what I have here. It's just a handful of simple ideas, and then really I just took the time. That's what it took, was a lot of time. I believe that for this part, it was about 2 hours worth of work that I'm going to be adding in. And of course, I've condensed it so that we can enjoy it in a slightly smaller amount of time, because it really was so much work. And even after the amount of work that I did here by hand with the pen, I ended up doing a couple more hours editing it with my iPad. And so I will show that to you at the end, the final result, after I did some tweaks here and there. Usually, for any of you who are interested, although it is possible to do a drawing entirely on your iPad, some of you may know already if you're a digital artist, it's possible to do all of the work there, but personally I really enjoy doing most of the line work by hand, like I am right now. And then what I do is I take a photo of it, or I'll scan it with my scanner, and I will transfer that into the iPad and just use a simple program similar to Procreate, and just use a few of the filters and some of the layering devices to just kind of tweak how dark or how light, or I may even play around with it and actually add some color into it. There are some really easy ways to color an image. So that's usually what I do, and I play around with that. But most of the line work, pretty much most of the work is done here. I think really just because for me personally, my artwork is more than just about producing a result. It's more about actually spending the time and really getting in there and getting to know myself as an artist and getting to know what kind of things really drive me. So I think that's what this process was for me. So one thing that I came to recognize was that I finally am ready to start offering some prints. I have been hesitating to do this for such a long time. I really do have a really nice collection of completed works that I was actually really proud of, that I've made over the last year or 2 years. And although I really like them a lot, for some reason I just never felt like I should sell them or sell prints of them. I don't know why. I feel like part of it may simply be that I just don't know how to price them, or I feel like no one's going to want them. But I'm just going to go ahead and take the plunge. Even if I don't sell too much, it's okay. I think that it's really just, it comes down to just that insecurity and feeling like because I don't know what I'm doing, that maybe I just won't do it right. But I'm trying to remind myself to be just as open-minded with these kind of processes as I have been with so many other things. And really, the truth is I just have to try it. And then only by trying it am I going to learn. And then I can just kind of start refining the process. So definitely, very soon, I am going to start offering some prints of this drawing, as well as a handful of others that you may or may not have seen. There are things that I have posted to my social media in the past that I am now kind of refining and working on to get them exactly the way that I want them. And so there will be an entire series of drawings that I will be making available very soon, and we'll see how it goes. Like I said, even if it behaves differently than I thought I wanted it to, then that's okay. It's just so important to start just by trying it out, just by seeing what it's like out there. Maybe I won't price it right. Maybe I won't sell enough. Maybe nobody will like it, and that's okay. I think that as artists, so many of us are just so afraid that we just don't move. We don't budge. But we're never going to find out if anything that we create really appeals to anyone if we never put it out there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give that a try, and we'll see how it goes. And however it turns out, I'm just going to be happy that it happens at all, and we'll see how that goes. So I'm just trying to kind of maintain a bit of that positivity and possibly share it a little bit with you. If you've been hesitating, if you think maybe no one's going to like your work, maybe give it a try. You never know. Put it out there, tell people about it, see what happens. You never know. You might find that there are some people who just really love it, and that's wonderful. Wouldn't it be wonderful if just one person loved what you create? Even that's enough. That should be enough. And I think because so many of us are exposed to a world right now in which we feel like we have to have popularity among hundreds, among thousands, among hundreds of thousands, like there must be some kind of multiplicative effect in the amount of love and attention that we garner from complete strangers. And that's not really necessary, is it? So while I drew this, while I worked on this in those hours and hours and hours that it took, I really tried not to think about what kind of money I'm going to get back from this. Because it's so easy to focus on that, to think, oh, well, if I'm going to invest 3 hours, and then you start doing some math and you think, oh, I have to multiply that by this much, I have to charge this much per hour. And then there are a lot of equations that a lot of wonderful artists have shared on the internet to help other artists kind of price their work. And I have gone through so many of them trying to think of which one I think works for me. And really in the end, any time that I have actually sold my work anywhere of any kind, I realized that what got my work to sell was just the fact that I got it out there. Just the fact that I tried selling it. I used to make a lot of garments that were made in crochet, so handmade crochet garments, and I sold quite a few. I used to sell not just simple scarves, but actually lace, complete lace garments. And I had a lot of fun making them, and I was really glad that there were people out there who loved them. But again, if I'd never actually bothered to put them up on eBay or on Etsy or something like that, they wouldn't have sold. No one would have seen them. So I'm going to try to do the same thing with my drawings. I'm not going to worry about how much time it took, although I understand that, yeah, sometimes the money is important. I do need to buy groceries. I do need to go pay the bills. It's really important. But if that's the only thing that's on my mind when I'm drawing, then I'm going to absolutely hate it. I'm going to hate it so much. I know that here, among others, in our little community that we've got here, we have made comments about just how much, for so many of us, it's not about money. It really isn't. And for some people, it really does need to be about money because they're struggling. And very much recently, I was still struggling. But right now, I'm not. Thankfully, my life circumstances have improved. Thankfully, I am somewhere where I feel safe. Thankfully, I have a home. Thankfully, my groceries are covered. And so I don't feel like I have to
At this
just
point in the
focus on
drawing,
my-
if you're wondering what I'm
and that's-
using right
it's
now,
a wonderful feeling.
this is
I
a
can
pen
create
that
this
is
stuff.
filled with
I can spend as much
a
time
gray
as I need
ink,
to
and
improving
it is
what
a
I'm working on,
Kuretake pen,
improving
and
my
it is
line work,
also
improving my
a brush
sketches.
pen.
So it actually makes it really
I've
easy
mentioned
to
that
apply
recently I'm going to start
coloring
working
here.
more
I love
on
using it for
drawing
shading
faces and human forms.
I only got it recently, a couple
and I
of
can
weeks
just kind of
ago, and it's
focus on
turned
that.
out really nicely since then. So I'm afraid that I'm actually going to end up using it up really soon just because I'm using it on so many different drawings. But it is great, and I highly recommend it. It will definitely be linked in the description in case you're interested in checking it out, or if you just haven't tried anything like this before. It's really wonderful. You can see that I'm really adding so much depth to this just by kind of sprinkling it throughout in lots of little places and just kind of playing around. If the drawings are just done in the black and white, if it is just black ink on white paper, it is great. It also looks really good. But I think that just adding some gray can really just make it pop. And overall, it just adds a really wonderful quality to the drawing. So I highly recommend it. Highly, highly recommend it. I'm going to be using this quite a bit in this drawing. There may be some sections that I won't record, but it does end up being a pretty important part of the drawing is just shading, shading, shading throughout. I think this is where I spent so much time. Sometimes even more time is spent on the shading than on the actual drawing. I think just creating all of those gray values and really trying to experiment with some of the places where there is just a slight shadow, and then what you can do is after you add one layer and let it dry, you can add just a little more and it really deepens that shadow there. And so there's a lot of experimenting to be done here with the ink just to see what can happen. You can see it's really making it pop. It's really bringing forward all of those whites now look so much more intentional now that there are gray tones in the drawing. So I definitely recommend it so much. Or you can always use a pencil or really anything else that you're comfortable with that you can create some of those gray tones or gray values in your drawing. Just really play around with it. I highly recommend it. Whatever it is you're doing, even if you're just doing something that's like doodling and you feel like it's really kind of low stress, play around with a pencil. Use something else, or if you have any kind of markers, play around with some markers. You never know what you're going to find out. There's always so much to discover and so much to play with. I think when I was doing this line work right here too, I decided to use a different pen just because my other pen, the poor thing, was starting to run out of ink and it wasn't making lines very well, so I switched to a different one. I was hoping to just be able to stick with a single pen, but it seems like as I got towards the end, there were certain textures and certain effects that I wanted that just my one pen really wasn't able to help me with. But for now, I managed to just keep using it just to create those small little details. I think that pen worked just fine. I wanted to really add a lot more of those little spirals into this area and just kind of work them in there. And I think it just worked out really nicely. When I look at those spirals, I think not so much about curly hair, which it kind of looks like that. It does look a little bit like curly hair. But I think for me, I was thinking of water and how it kind of swirls when it flows down an opening, and just the way that it kind of whirls around. That's what I was thinking a lot about when I was doing this. So it was just a lot of fun. You can also see that as I work around the edges here, I'm not packing in the designs as much. It really was a conscious effort on my part just because I have a tendency to fill everything in so tightly. I wanted to try to make a design that didn't fill all the way to the edge. I will practice this more. I know that there is a bit of a quality to a drawing that maybe only fills up about half the page and just kind of looks like it's spilling over. I really want to try that. It's just there's something about doodling that makes me want to fill the whole page. I know I'm not alone. I've talked to other people who feel like once you start, you just can't stop and you just keep going. And that's just part of the charm in doodling, is that you start with one line and one line just grows exponentially. It becomes 2, which becomes 4, which becomes higher and higher and higher until you've got a million little lines and it just looks amazing. And so I know that that's what I do. So for these drawings that are specifically going to be for my prints, I'm just kind of trying to keep it under control. The other thing I can say about these, if you decide that you want to dedicate your time to something that's this involved and that's going to take this many hours. One thing is that if you decide to use maybe like your iPad, or if you have some kind of tablet that you can draw on, keep in mind that even though it should have only been 8 hours worth of work, it could take 50 if you're using some kind of technology, only because I've done this in the past. And I love, love, love doing all this line work. I love doing all this doodling. And what ends up happening is, for drawings that I've done in the past, I think I have one that probably took about 100 hours. Only because on the iPad you can zoom in. And you can zoom in and you can zoom in and you can keep zooming in until you are so incredibly close in there that you can just about control every single pixel. And me knowing me, I zoomed in and I controlled every single pixel like the strange person that I am. And I loved it, but it did, like I said, take about 100 wonderful hours to complete that drawing. And I will be sharing that one when I post up the images that, or the artworks. I don't know why I would call them images. They are artworks. The drawings that I've completed that I'll share with you. I'll let you know which one it was that took that many hours. It was very satisfying, but I don't believe I will be doing that again. Because as I mentioned earlier, I do prefer these days to just draw with a pen and just with regular paper and just draw that way. At least it limits how much I can kind of focus or hyper focus on, since I think that that's really what ends up happening with me. It just limits it a little bit for me so that these projects don't end up becoming too overwhelming or too catastrophically intricate that I end up just not being able to make the kind of progress that I want to make. As far as this drawing that I've got right here, you'll notice that I'm getting pretty close to the end at this point. This is the part where I'm just kind of working on that lower right corner, just adding in more detail and just really getting some of those final little touches on the edges. However, there is still one little area that remains after this. You can see it's still the face. I haven't added too much detail to the face, but I am going to be getting to that in just a second. What I like to do when I'm working on these, especially if it's on a full sheet of paper, is I occasionally like to just kind of lean back and look at the drawing as a whole, just because I know that if I've got it really close to my face, I don't notice things the way I want to, so I kind of just lean back and just try to decide what it is I'm going to do next. For this part, what I decided to do is just use a big ballpoint pen and just to try to do a little bit of hatching. I haven't done that in a while, and so I figured I needed some practice. If this didn't turn out the way I wanted to, which in some ways I think I got a little carried away, but I figured it would be okay, and that when I went to do some of the digital edits, I could always adjust some of the colors. So I just went in and just started doing it. I've done this kind of shading using cross-hatching on a few other projects in the past. I have used the big pen before to do shading just in other kind of ways. And so I figured it should be fine if it's too dark, if it's too anything, it could just kind of adjust it. So I just started with the bottom there, just working a little bit on that area around the neck and the shoulders, and just started working my way up from there. It was a little scary, I will admit. I simply was not prepared, wasn't ready to do shading on faces again. I don't know why it's always been so difficult, although I know that there are lots of different ways to do it. And so this time I just kind of got ready for it and I just did it. I decided to do some hatching at a bit of a 45-degree angle as well as some vertical hatching. And just worked on it slowly. Just tried to remember that it's going to be imperfect because that's how things were meant to be. At least that's how I think they were meant to be. Things don't have to be perfect. And so I just added little tiny lines little by little and just hoped for the best. I just tried to focus on the areas where I thought that there should be a little bit more shading, a little bit darker. I did look at a couple of references just to try to get my bearings, just to try to see what areas needed the most shading. I think I could have done a little bit of a better job, but again, I'm not going to consider this a mistake, because I think that any learning experience is certainly not a mistake. And I learned from this. I really needed the practice. Thankfully, like I said, I have an iPad and I was able to kind of tweak the coloration on this a little bit just to kind of get things a little bit more balanced so it wouldn't look too scratchy. Although that scratchy look is kind of nice. I did keep some of that. But you can see here, I'm just doing my best to add shadows here and there. Really just the one area of this drawing as I was kind of working on it that I wasn't so sure about was the mouth. And so you'll see in the final result that the mouth looks considerably different in the last one. I did edit it with the iPad later. And I think there was just this one line that crosses the chin that was a little bit too dark and it just looked out of place. That's the only thing. Everything else I just about left the same and just tweaked the depth of the colors a little bit. And I was okay with everything. I was okay with all of it. I just kind of kept playing around just to see how far I could take it and that it would still look fairly normal. Sometimes I realize that there are also points in a drawing where it doesn't look so good. I think they call it the ugly phase. And this drawing definitely went through the ugly phase a handful of times, but I'm okay with that. I'm just trying to remember that it's good to accept it and just kind of go with it. So I will certainly be trying a different way to do the mouth and the lips the next time, but I'm okay with the way this turned out. It was a good practice. I haven't done it in such a long time that I was just kind of nervous to figure out where I'm supposed to put all those shadows, and this time I learned a little bit from that. It was a good experience. And after all these hours, so many hours just trying to pick up on some old skills and pick up on new skills and just trying to see if I could figure out where the shadows go on a face. This is pretty much the result. I did end up going back and adding a little bit more of the grays with that pen that has the gray ink. I did do that as well in a few other places. And I think the result was pretty good. I still have the ear at this point, but then I dealt with that ear that's just kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. I dealt with it later digitally and just kind of added some grays around it. And I think it turned out really good. And here is what I came up with after I edited. I added a few little details digitally that I think just kind of make it look a little more interesting. Here it is. This is the print in 8x10. I trimmed it and got it ready just to see what it would look like. And I think it looks pretty nice. I'm really happy with the result. I tweaked some of the shadows. I made some adjustments. Let me know what you think if you like this kind of thing. I'm going to be posting it up, I think, in about a week. I will also be posting up a bunch of books, but I will definitely let you guys all know exactly the date and exactly the time so that you can go check it out in case you're interested in supporting some of the work that I do. This is going to be the way that you can show me that you enjoy some of my work. I will have prints and I will have some books, some journals available in about a week's time. So this is going to be fun. I look forward to it, and thank you so much for joining me. I know this has been a super long progress for this drawing, but it was so worth it. This result was just so satisfying. I'm really happy with the results. I'm really happy with the outcomes. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.